Britain is a step closer to being sent to the polls in a snap election as politicians rush through a bill designed to thwart a no-deal Brexit. The legislation, designed to force Prime Minister Boris Johnson to seek an extension, has cleared a major hurdle, sailing through the House of Commons, 327 votes to 299. It will now be sent to the country's upper house, the House of Lords. If passed, Britain won't leave the bloc by October 31 as planned unless a deal is locked down.
It's a bill that effectively ends the negotiations, a bill that demands an extension at least until next year and perhaps for many more years to come, and a bill that insists Britain acquiesce to the demands of Brussels and hands control to our partners. It's a bill designed to overturn the biggest democratic vote in our history, the 2016 referendum. And it's therefore a bill without precedent in the history of this House, seeking as it does to force the Prime Minister with a pre-drafted letter to surrender in international negotiations.
Mr Johnson is now demanding an immediate vote to hold a general election on October 15th. He says this decision must be put to the public.
The country must now decide whether the Leader of the Opposition or I go to those negotiations in Brussels on the 17th of October to sort this out, because everybody will know that if the Right Honourable Gentleman were to go there, were to be the Prime Minister, he would beg for an extension.
We are less than 60 days away from leaving the EU with no deal. The Prime Minister has had 2 days in office before the summer recess and then planned to prorogue Parliament. Yesterday, he lost one vote, his first vote in Parliament, and he now wants to dissolve Parliament. He's desperate, absolutely desperate, to avoid scrutiny. In his third day in office, after 5 questions from me, we haven't had an answer to any of them.
Well, let's go live now to CNN reporter Hadas Gold from outside the British Parliament. Hadas, good morning, good evening to you. Can you break it down for us, the events of the last couple of hours, what they mean and I guess what the likelihood of this bill passing the House of Lords is?
Well, it has been a pretty stunning few hours within the building that's just across the street from me right now within Parliament. Most notable, of course, is the passing of the bill in the House of Commons that is trying to block Boris Johnson from getting a no-deal Brexit. It's pretty much forcing him to asking for an EU extension. Now, what happens next? It has to go to the upper house, the House of Lords, where it will then possibly be approved. But there seems to be some talk that there will be some sort of filibuster to try to block it by some pro-Brexit peers in the House of Lords. Of course, now Boris Johnson, just a few moments ago, is tabling a motion for a general election, a snap election that we're expecting to happen within the next month or so. I'm standing outside of Parliament, though, amongst some of the protesters. You can see there's been some sort of small clash between some pro-Brexit UKIP party factions and people who have been protesting against Brexit. They're protesting in favour of immigrants, in favour of what they say should be open borders. There have been rallies in this square. It's called Parliament Square, traditional place for rallies and protests outside of Parliament. There have been rallies here over the last few days, and they plan to continue the rallies over the next few days as these debates happen in Parliament. And for many of them that I've been speaking to, it's some of them, their first protests that they've been participating in when it comes to Brexit, and partly it's because of Boris Johnson. Some of them said they were actually okay with Theresa May. It's Boris Johnson there against, it's Boris Johnson's way of trying to push Brexit, they say, down their throats that they are protesting against. But when I go around the country and I talk to people who voted for Brexit, who voted to leave the European Union, they're okay with these harsh measures that Boris Johnson is taking. They're okay with the suspension of Parliament because to them it's whatever it takes to get it done.
Can you just elaborate, Hadas, if you wouldn't mind, on the mood outside of Parliament at the moment? I mean, is it a tense environment or are people just sort of quietly watching? Can you just describe what it's like to be amongst all of that?
Well, I have to say that for the past few months, I mean, it's been forever now. It feels like we've been covering all of the events in Parliament. There have been sort of a permanent element of protest out here, but in the last few days, it's definitely grown. Just a few hours ago, there was a bigger rally here in Parliament Square, probably with a few hundred people. Last night, actually, I was with protesters who shut down Westminster Bridge. That is the main bridge just outside of Big Ben, the big clock tower we all know so well from the London skyline, who had shut down the bridge in protest. There hasn't been the million-man marches we've seen when it comes, for example, to People's Vote we saw in past months, but they are planning a larger march this Saturday. The question will be how many people will come out, how many people think that their voices can help stop this no-deal situation, because for a lot of the protesters that we are talking to out here, they're very happy with the vote that just happened in Parliament. They're very happy with the fact that possibly a no-deal is going to be taken off the table in the next few days.
You did talk about, attempts to filibuster, delaying tactics in the House of Lords tonight. Do you expect that a snap election would be called tonight? I mean, what happens from here on in? Is there what sort of a result is the most likeliest outcome this evening? Your time.
Well, yeah, well, the question is although Boris Johnson, he's tabling a motion for a general election, 2/3 of the House of Commons need to vote for it. So there's the question of will certain MPs, for example, from the Labour Party, will they vote in favour of a general election? Some of them have said they will vote in favour of holding a general election only if a no-deal Brexit is completely taken off the table. So there is a big question of whether we will have a general election, how it will be called. There's a lot of things up in the air here tonight. I mean, the next few hours in Parliament will be pivotal. The next few days in Parliament will be pivotal. We really have absolutely no idea, as we've had kind of no idea for the last few months, about what's going to happen and what this country will look like come October 31st.
Yeah.